When the smoke clears, we're still standing. Yes, we stand our ground.
You're listening to Everlasting Veteran.
When the smoke clears, we're still standing.
Welcome, everybody, to Everlasting Veteran. I am your host, Ryan Landry, also known as Wind Talker to many local people I'm friends with here. I have an amazing guest, Chris Albright. He is a Marine Corps veteran. He is also a transformational coach, helping entrepreneurs live a healthier, happy, and balanced life. And I think his experiences, his transformation to the person he embodies and his mindset is very important to the veteran community, to people that maybe aren't veterans, but overall being a good person and living that happier, healthier life and staying in the right mindset. Chris, I am so happy to have you on the episode, and I want listeners kind of dive into when you served, your roles were. And you have a good list of different diverse jobs within the Marine Corps. Um, what stands out to you as something that has brought you to the point in your life serving the Marine Corps that helped you embody what you are and what you push forward as your mission now?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Ryan. So like you mentioned, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I served from 1993 to 2013. I retired in June of 2013. I was my primary MOS was machine gunner. So I spent the majority of my career in infantry units on the West Coast and the East Coast. I was deployed 6 times during my career. And starting out, I had a couple of deployments. My very first one was a combat deployment to Somalia. We were part of the UN withdrawal of the forces out of Somalia in 95. And later on, I had a couple uneventful deployments, Westpac deployments, and then a few deployments to Okinawa. But then that was my first one was with 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. I had a tour with 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines, and then I spent some time on Marine Security Guard duty as attachment commander in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Shanghai, China. And then I went back to the fleet to 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, and deployed again to Okinawa and to Iraq in 2009. And I finished up my career in Washington, D.C. as the 8th and I H&S company gunnery sergeant. And my final assignment was as the Marine Corps funeral director in Arlington National Cemetery. So I did have a pretty diverse career. Started out as infantry and kind of got a chance to travel around and do a few different things, which was pretty exciting. After I retired in 2013, I jumped into the job market trying to find a career that fit my interests and my skills. I had managed on my assignment and MSG duty to get a bachelor's degree in IT management. And then in Washington, D.C., when I was stationed there at 8th and I got my master's degree in cybersecurity and an MBA. I figured I would jump into the government contracting space and the Beltway Bandit kind of thing, and had a hell of a time trying to find a job, primarily because I was a career infantry Marine with this really high-tech degree. So I had a bunch of operational skills, so to speak, and leadership and time on the ground. But then I was tech smart. I had the cybersecurity degree. So I wasn't really experienced in that career field. So I had a really hard time finding a job, and I ended up starting my own business right after I got out. I ran a IT franchise for about 6.5 years. Because the way I figured it was I was writing resumes trying to find a job, and that was just kicking my ass, trying to figure out how to make myself sound like I fit the job that somebody else is offering. I'm like, well, you know what? I can figure this out. I can get my own business off the ground and do my own thing instead of trying to fit in somebody else's shoebox, so to speak. And my mindset coming out of the military was, whatever opportunity to get, I can make it work. I can figure it out. I can do it. Like, I've been put in so many different situations in my career where they're just like, okay, you're in charge now. Here's what you need to get done. Go do it. And it wasn't like I had to know the job. I just had to understand how things were working so I can make sure they're working smoothly. So getting into a franchise for me at the time seemed like a logical move. It had a structure like the military because there was already um an infrastructure that I could operate from and a policy kind of guideline to stick to, but it was my own thing and I could do my own thing.
Right. So what were kind of some of the struggles that you faced? I mean, you come out of the military, obviously, and coming out of the military is a very resume that a lot of civilian sectors don't understand how it relates to the civilian world. And then you go on and you become more educated and show that, hey, I'm versatile in this in the civilian sector as well. Um, what were some of the frustrations go along with that when you were transition trying to, like you said, fit that mold that another job was, looking for? What were the struggles and stresses to that?
Um, like I said, I had a pretty big um at the time I had a pretty big ego when I got out. Like I've done all these things, I can do all this stuff. I was a
Hmm.
master sergeant when I my final year in the Marine Corps. So I was like, you know what, I can do anything. Like just give me an opportunity, I can jump in and do it. But the problem I had was understanding the language of a job description and trying to write my resume with being a vehicle commander in a weapons company and being a platoon sergeant and being an operations chief and being a company gunny and doing a detachment commander role. Like all those different jobs are very diverse, but the language of whatever I was doing, it was hard to translate it into something more tech or even more corporate. Um, we
Right.
weren't lining up. Like I knew for a fact I could do the job without a doubt, but trying to put my entire career on a piece of paper and say, this is what I'm capable of. I just couldn't get the translation to play out so that people would call me back for an opportunity to impress them. So it was 9 months of writing
Right.
resumes. And I was like, this is just a waste of time. It's just frustrating.
Yeah. And that's, you make a good point is being able to articulate your experience in the military and how that translate into the civilian world. And I talked about this with some other veterans on a different episode is, with that DD 214, there's many employers in the civilian sector that don't even know how to read it. And it doesn't even have everything on it. And most of the time, and I know from my personal experience as well, that's what they, want to put in your hiring file. But, I came along with um, letters of recommendation from my senior commanders and senior enlisted, and those didn't even come out. They didn't want to take a look at it when I was applying to, civilian sector jobs, and it's kind of frustrating because it really painted a picture of your capability, what you did, because the acronyms the military uses. Let's face it, nobody's going to know them unless you like research it, right? And
Right.
I think the big thing in transition, like you said, is being able to properly articulate and market yourself. It's a self promotion um, to the civilian sector and be able to properly make what you did in the military transfer into the civilian. It's very important to be able to do so. So you started your own business. What went along with that? What made you kind of go that way and give you that push after having essentially all these turn downs? Um, and what formed it into what it is to
Um, so what caused me to get my own business was months and months and months of writing resumes, trying to figure out how to get somebody to give me an opportunity for an interview so that we could have a conversation so I could actually articulate what it is I've done and what I'm capable of. And in my job search in the DC area, I spent a lot of time going to different networking things. There was something that was at the um, Navy club or something. Anyway, it was a monthly thing where all the government contractors would get together and kind of socialize and network, and people would pass out business cards. So I was trying to get in those circles, trying to get myself known so I get an opportunity. And I joined a few different organizations, like the Marine Executive Association and other things in the DC area, so I could network and be seen and get opportunity to speak with somebody instead of handing them a resume. And in that process, what I ran into was there was something that it didn't feel right for me trying to get into the government contracting space. It was just a different world that I wasn't really finding my niche in to really kind of say, this is the job that I want. And I met a guy, fortunately, I met a guy that was a franchise broker, and he worked with veterans to get them deals with franchises. And I didn't pay him any money, but when the deal was finished, he would get paid from the franchise for finding somebody to buy one of their territories. So I got a deal with that guy to say, okay, look, I'm tired of looking for a job. Help me find a franchise that I can, fit into and run on my own. So we went through a huge screening list of all my skills and interests and whatnot. And I said I had those degrees in technology. So I was like, this one with the computer support type structure and operation, I was like, well, I have the education in this, and operationally speaking, I can make stuff work. So I'm just going to try this. And literally the same day I got my small business loan to open my franchise, I did finally get an offer from a government contracting company in the DC area to sit in a cubicle for a year. And it was, a decent salary, but I really had to sit down and kind of weigh it out. Like, do I want to sit in a cubicle in Quantico writing policies and plans or whatever for a year? Or do I want to jump off the cliff here and go and get my own business and make it work, just fly and see what happens. And so it took a lot of back and forth with my wife to try to figure out if that was what I wanted to do. And I was like, you know what? If I'm in a contract that's only a year long, I'm going to be looking for a job again, potentially in 6 months, trying to figure out what's next. Right. And I was like, well, just run right into it and just do my own thing and just make it work. So that's what I decided to do, was get the franchise. And to be honest, as much as I enjoyed the franchise and learning the things I did and running a business and supporting clients and doing the day-to-day operations for a business, the wear and tear of it, like it was wearing me out. Like I got so burned out. I only ran that company for about 6.5 years, and I got to a point where I was super unhealthy and I was stressed out every day, and I hated my phone, and I hated all my daily interactions with people, and I hated email, and all the people were complaining about really trivial computer issues that weren't really severe, but in their mind it was important. And it was just, being on blast every day because somebody's email or password isn't working or whatever the case was just wearing me out.
Right.
And what I found was I was in the trenches every day. I was on call for pretty much 6.5 years because of my business being tech support. I had an employee, but it was a pretty small operation, and we had probably 30 different companies we were supporting. Even with our back office support, I still had a lot of direct interaction with the clients, and I was overeating because I was always going out networking and socializing, and I'd go out and eat at the events and then come home and eat, and then I wasn't sleeping well because I was worried about the client's issues and what's coming up the next business day and all these things and what's going to crash today and who's going to call me screaming about some problem. And I wasn't sleeping. I was eating too much. I was drinking a lot in the evenings because I was just stressed out and just hated life and wanted to numb myself and just kind of shut off for a bit. And I opened the franchise late in 2013, a few months after I retired. And by mid 2019, I was close to 300 pounds and I was super miserable. I had all sorts of health conditions, and I would think I was 44 at the time. And I decided something had to change. So I needed to stop sitting on my butt every day in my laptop in my lap and my recliner. So I started walking every day, and I decided that I had to make some changes to my daily activity, but also my diet, because I was the one working from home. So I was making dinner every day. And I told the wife, I say, look, I have to get active. I have to start doing something. I'm taking all these medications every day. I feel like crap. I'm not sleeping. I'm not healthy. I had diabetes. I had high blood pressure. I had high cholesterol. I had GERD. I had all these issues. And I was like, this can't last. Like, I can't keep going like this. This is not how I'm going to live my life, being overweight and miserable and medicated and
Right.
just exhausted every day. So how I got to where I am now is I decided to sell that business. Even though I was on a 10-year contract, I managed to find another franchise owner in the area that was willing to buy up my territory to take it off my hands, because he was a larger organization and he had the capacity to support my clients as well as his. So he fortunately bought my office in 2019. I started to get myself healthy, and within 90 days, I had walked off about 45 pounds. And my doctor had given me a clean bill of health, and I had corrected my diabetes, my blood pressure and cholesterol issues were all corrected. And going into the pandemic, I was actually on a health kick and I was losing weight. I dropped a total about 85 pounds. And
Wow.
I had noticed that all of my buddies and people that I associated with on LinkedIn and Facebook and whatnot, a lot of them were kind of showing the signs of the same misery that I was going through. So I was like, hey, look, we're all, the way I felt was I was in the trenches every day on my own for 6 years trying to run a business, and I had no support to my left and my right. I had other franchisees I would speak to, but they were all in their own cities and other states and whatnot. So I was on my own for 6 years. I was kind of, hooking and jabbing every single day, trying to figure it out and make it work. And it was wearing me out. So
Right.
I could see that same look in other guys' faces. And I was like, I need to start helping other people figure out that they don't have to live their life being miserable in a job they might not like. And to start focusing on themselves. The Mind, Body, Breathe slogan on my social media is an idea that came to me at the beginning of this year. It just kind of came to me on a walk. I had gone through a journey of changing my mindset about my life and realizing I had gotten to a point where things had to change. I was so miserable every day that life could not continue in that direction. And I had to take action in order to get myself in a new positive mindset so I could get myself back on track. The body thing, mind, body, weapon in the military, you're taking your body and your weapon. The breathing
Yep.
part was something I picked up along the way. I briefly, after I sold the franchise, I worked at a nonprofit for about a year that taught veterans and first responders, that taught them post-traumatic growth, like breathing practices, gratitude and journaling and meditation and walking and physical activities, throwing, shooting arrows, go and play with the horses and going kayaking and all sorts of fun things. Basically as a way to get your mind and your body reconnected, get more physically active and stop isolating and stop self-medicating and stop sitting in your own misery and getting out there and connecting with others and yourself. And the breath work aspect is something I picked up recently. I had heard about breath work and, the yoga thing and whatnot. And what this is, instead of the yoga thing, it's more of a meditative kind of rhythmic breathing that helps me kind of calm my nervous system, reduce the stress and inflammation, and reduce other health conditions to keep my mind and my body connected. So the Mind, Body, Breathe slogan kind of dawned on me at the beginning of the year. It's like, I've been working on my mind quite a bit, trying to get myself out of this funk that I've been in the past few years. I've obviously done a lot of body work myself, from being, overweight and miserable to a point where I'm back to the weight I was when I was in the Marine Corps. And the breath work is kind of helping my mind and my body kind of connect with my head and my heart, so to speak, kind of getting back on track in a positive wavelength. So what I try to do is live a pretty consistent routine. Every morning I get up at 5 a.m. I go with the wife for a nice short, 2-mile walk with our dogs. It takes about 40 minutes, so 45 minutes. And then I come home and meditate, usually do a little bit of journaling. And I start the day in a positive mindset and continue to work on myself and not fall into that same kind of slump and that funk that was wearing me out when I was running that franchise. So what I see happening is a lot of us get to a certain point in life where we might enjoy our job. We might have loved it at one point, but we get in this routine where we just get up, we kind of grind it out every day. We go to work, waiting for the day to end, and then we come home, and kind of isolate because we're exhausted from the day. Maybe we had a lot of stress in our work life. We don't really socialize much because we're just kind of exhausted and don't want to have to put up with somebody else and their energy, kind of getting, I don't want to say getting too close or personal, but really it's a matter of, just leave me alone for a bit. I need to kind of rest and recoup. And we get in this routine. And over time, as you age, you're a little more sedentary. You're not doing as much as you were in the military. So you're putting on weight because you're still kind of eating like that young warrior, in the military. You could eat whatever and
Right.
you'd be running it off the next day, right? You go hike 20 miles or run 5 miles or whatever the case. You didn't really have to worry about it too much. But when you're working a desk job and you're eating that way, you're obviously going to put on weight. And as we age, most of us aren't as active as we used to be. So I help people try to understand that it's easy to get back in shape if you've kind of let things kind of fall off over the years. You don't have to, stay that way. It's not a life sentence that you're going to be on medication and miserable your entire adult life. You can take steps to kind of get back on track. But also the mindset, because as you know, in the military, you're always with your brothers left and right. There's always somebody next to you that's going through the same thing you are. You're working together. You might be miserable, but you're all together as a team, right? In the civilian world,
Right.
unless you have any really close friends, you're usually on your own. You're kind of doing your own thing. You get stuck in your own head and your own thoughts, and you kind of think you're fighting the battle alone. And that's not true, because there are people out there that want to help. It's just a matter of staying connected with others.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a good point. I mean, a lot of veterans can use this. I think just being a person, even in the civilian side, it's very important to be able to kind of take a step back, self reflect on your journey, and then be adapt to the life that you have now. And in transition, I talk about this all the time. With transition, we get into that mindset of our day is pretty much spelled out for us in the military, and even people in the civilian world, like you said, you got your 9 to 5 and you're just waiting for that clock to hit 5 and then you're gone. And you get into that mundane routine of stagnant behaviors, and it slowly starts breaking you down little by little, uh, and you start losing your purpose, think a little bit,
Yep.
if you're just going through the motions, and it doesn't mean anything to you, and it's paycheck, and something to sustain your life activities. I think it's very important to, like you said, get your mind right. And it's one thing that I started this season off with is being the best version of yourself for you first, because it's very important to stay in that routine. We have such a strict routine in the military. Then we get out, and it's awesome to be able to come up with the routine and stay in a routine, whatever it might be. And everybody's transition and journey after the military is going to be a little bit different, but I think we can all agree on is maintaining whatever routine it is going to help keep you in the right mindset, day after day, and finding the purpose, um, and getting your mind and your body to connect with each other. That was, and we talked before, that was a big thing with me with back pain, um, and not being able to do as much physical activity as I was used to. I used to, love lifting heavy. It brought me joy to reach a personal goal when I was lifting in the gym, and to the point where it's almost crippling, and it affects your mindset because now you feel like you're broken, um, and you just don't know how to adapt, to the change as we get older. Like you said, our bodies change, and everything else, and transition is a never ending thing. It continues through life because you're constantly transitioning, and your body's changing and changing who you are, and you have to embody that, embrace it, and recognize it in order to be the best version of yourself for you, your family, and everybody else around you. Now, you are an RVer, which is super
Right.
cool, right?
Yeah.
I've heard so many stories of people just, and it's becoming like almost like a trend as well. Um, how have you adapted to that lifestyle? Um, obviously, going from, house or apartment or condo, whatever, then you can kind of just pick up and move on a whim if you want.
Right.
What's that lifestyle like, and what's the pros and cons, or what do you love about it?
So my wife and I spoke about getting an RV for quite a few years. My last assignment in DC, I was living in Northern Virginia, and we actually bought a house, and we're living in that house for about 10 years, which is, I think, the longest we'd ever lived in one place. We had one house, and 20 years in the military, getting a new assignment every 3 years, you never really stayed in one place long enough to gather a bunch of stuff. Like your house was always kind of, um, you had things, but you always had enough that when you had to move, you could pack it up and, relatively speaking, kind of move along, and you weren't stationary for very long. And so when we decided
Right.
that we wanted to look at buying an RV, we spent a lot of time researching different RV styles and what it would need to have for us. We have two boys. Both of them are grown men now. They're out of the house. But we decided that at the time, we had three medium to large dogs. So we had to have certain things that we could, one, have enough room for myself and my wife. She works from home. So she had to have an office space in the RV. And then we had to have enough capacity to support the dogs because they have to have, free room to move around and kind of not be running over each other. So
Right.
uh, in 2020, when I was on my health journey, we had decided that the market was so hot and we wanted to take advantage of it and sell our house. So we went out just on a whim one weekend and went to an RV dealer to see what they had for RVs in stock. And it so happened that the place we went to had one that met pretty much all of our requirements. It was a 40-foot fifth wheel. It had two rooms. It had four slide outs. It was a pretty good size vehicle. And we decided, hey, you know what? Let's do it. Let's buy it. We'll figure out selling the house. We'll get it on the market and get it ready. Um, at the time, my youngest son was 20, maybe 21. He was 20, and the oldest had already moved out, gone to college, got a job. So the youngest were like, "Hey, look, we're selling the house. You have to get some roommates, find an apartment, whatever. We'll help you, But the house is going away. We're getting the RV." So we put the house on the market, sold it within about 45 days. I think it was sold, and we were out of the house. Had the RV. Um, It was definitely a transition. We had so much crap we accumulated in 10 years in one house. We had to give stuff away. We had to sell stuff off. We threw a bunch of stuff away. I mean, I couldn't get rid of enough stuff. We had so much, a basement full of junk. We had 5 rooms in a house, and it was just like, good grief, where'd all this stuff come from? So the great thing about
Yeah.
downsizing to an RV was you really kind of prioritize, what do I need to keep? What do I actually need on a daily basis, right? It's nice to have rooms full of
Yeah.
things, but most of that stuff, you look around the house, you don't really use a lot of it. Just kind of sits there, or you forget you have it and you go out and buy another whatever. So you end up with two or three of one thing. Um,
Right.
so we downsized, cleaned the house out, gave away a whole bunch of stuff, put a few family heirlooms and furniture in storage, and then moved into the RV. So it was definitely a shift. The dogs were kind of freaked out because we had a nice yard. We had a fenced in place before. So being in a campground or wherever, you don't have a yard that the dogs can go run free. So we had to make sure that we would find campgrounds that have dog parks or were close to a dog park that we could take advantage of. But being able to move from one place to another is awesome because we had a nice house. We had nice neighbors. We knew most of them, but being stationary in one place for so long, maybe it was my career, 20 years of traveling around the world. I was used to kind of moving and going and seeing places, and I wanted to be able to do that more freely instead of like having to plan trips and they come back to the same house every time. You just pack up and just pick up and go, like you said.
Yeah, yeah, that's super cool. Now, do you think, having the mindset that you have now with Mind Body Breathe, and tradition for other military members, we briefly talked about before of, you know, sometimes it takes 7, 10, years or whatever for a military person transferring out of the military, transformation from military service member to veteran. Um, what are some of the key things that you think that veterans or service members that are going to be transferring take away, so they can make that transition a little bit more effective sooner than later?
Um, so I was thinking about this last time we spoke. I was kind of trying to think what would be some great things to recommend. One is um, start running your resume through civilian friends and family that have civilian jobs as soon as you can. Don't wait until you're getting ready to retire or separate. Start now. Just go out and get somebody to look at it and say, how does this sound? Does this make sense in your line of work? I'm interested in this career after I get out. Would this resume make sense? Because
Yeah.
the 2-week transition period when I was retiring was not helpful in any way to get me sort of shifted from career Marine to civilian Chris Albright. It didn't give me enough time for anything. So I was spending a lot of time trying to figure it out at the last minute. Um, so the resume game, if you're going to be applying for a job, start immediately. Don't wait until you're even a year away from getting out. Start as now. Just get something on paper and get a civilian to look at it and say, what does that even mean? Like, can you put that in civilianese, right? Can you translate it from
Right.
military to civilian? But also, I'm not a big sports fan, but I'm going to use this analogy because it's kind of how I see the military, like I talked about earlier, the food and the physical activity. So, you ever notice that football players, when you see them after they've been separated from the NFL or whatever, and they've retired, they swell up like a food blister. They get really huge, right?
Yep.
Because their entire job, their career was train. Your body is your instrument in that career, right? You're playing football and you need to be a top performer. So you're eating a lot, you're training a lot, you have a very demanding physical job. Well, that's the same way in the military. We eat whatever
Right.
we want because we know we're going to be running it off or hiking it off or going to the field for a month at a time. So we lose the weight. It comes off pretty easily. Um, and it's a pretty um, stressful environment. So we're constantly active, constantly moving, constantly in some sort of engagement where it's like, if you're not in combat, you're training for combat. So it's very intense, right? So you're eating appropriately for that. You have to realize that most of the jobs in the civilian world are not that intense unless you're some sort of law enforcement that's constantly engaged in day-to-day activities, or if you're in some sort of profession that requires physical manual labor every day, you're going to be probably riding a desk or recliner at home or whatever the case is. You're working from home or driving a lot. If you're in a car a lot, you're going to be sedentary. So the amount of calories and
Hmm.
the amount of food that we eat on a daily basis in the military, in the field, I have no problem eating 3 or 4 MREs a day. I mean, it's like, if you have time, you eat, you just keep eating
Right.
and go to sleep, and then you're training. So you cannot eat the same rate as you did when you're active duty. It just doesn't work because your body, I'm 48 now, and I feel like I'm probably 35 or 40 years old, but I know a lot of people my age that look like they're probably 60 because they aren't taking care of themselves. They're kind of eating like they're a teenager. They're not really, they're not taking into consideration their energy output is less than their energy input, all the calories they're eating. So be very aware of staying active and scaling back on the diet and not feeling compelled to eat everything just because it looks good. I mean, obviously, that's a
Right.
problem across society, but really take into consideration shifting from full speed active duty to shifting gears back down to second gear or whatever it is in a civilian life, you're like, I don't have to get up every day and go run 5 miles. I can sleep in if I want to, or I can go to work and sit at my desk all day. It's just a dramatic shift, and the diet has to
Yeah.
shift with it.
Yeah, you go from a high speed, low drag to a low drag. It's a
Right,
complete
right.
reverse. You know, and I think you know, me personally, we talked about it before between you know, you get done with your job or whatever the case may be, and how my transition was a little bit different. I took off one uniform, put on another, and then you had those downtimes. You get done with work, and you're like, well, I'm going to have an adult beverage. I'm going to have some alcohol, you know, and you know, it turns into, all right, finding new drinking buddies. The ones in the military, you know, aren't around you all the time anymore. You know, in the military, you have those, you know, weekend barbecues and everything else. But Monday morning comes around, Monday through Friday, you know, you're hitting PT, you're working out after, even you're done with your whole day, you're hitting the gym, you know, because that's what everybody did. Um, you know, get done with your last formation, and then you had your workout buddies, and you go hit the gym for an hour or two, and then you know you go and eat and sleep and repeat. You know, go back to morning formation, and that was your day, that was your life. And
Yep.
I think it's very important that people. And I told you about, and I say this on all my episodes because the first reason is really about transition. One of my good friends and military brothers, Rick, he said to me, in order for him to, you know, help himself, he had to consciously make an effort to want to effectively transfer out of there, you know. And I think it's important for a mindset. And, you know, I've said it before. I wrote it down. He probably doesn't even know. It's just a simple phone conversation. Him and I were just chatting, catching up. And it stuck with me, though, because it's very well said. You know, you have to effectively want to transfer out of the military, you know, and have to be able to do so. You get out of the military and you're a veteran, you've earned that title, but there's a lot of stuff that comes with transition stress, you know, VA disabilities, you know, and you know we're going to be having a lot of um, career soldiers and airmen and Marines coming out of the military that had served multiple deployments. You know, 200,000 veterans transfer every single year, and we just wrapped up that debacle when we pulled out of Afghanistan, and I'll go into a different episode about that. But all those people that I served with, and many others served with, and maybe you served with as well, haven't done that transfer yet. And I think it's important for us to be able to get our knowledge and our experience because we've done the transition, we've dealt with the transition stress, we've dealt with um, I need to find something more because I don't feel like I have my purpose back. You know, and you're in the military, you're very purpose driven, and because it's, you know, as an artilleryman, you know, you had your purpose, you go to the field, you do your training, you do your PT, your schedule spelt out for you, you had your purpose, you push to get promoted, you push to, you know, do whatever, and you get out, and like you said, you don't have the military brothers to your left, to your right, motivating, pushing you, and having that brotherhood and having that kind of loneliness that comes with and you not having that one strong brotherhood 24/7 in your face in the working environment can be detrimental to your mental health as well.
Mhm.
And it's very important to to be able to keep in the right mindset to go through this transition and continuing to transfer and transition out of the military, because it's just like going through life, right? You always have big and small transitions. You know, I've been a police officer for the last decade, but I have a transition and purpose starting this podcast, which is more than a podcast. This is just the vessel to be able to get other veterans and my message out there to be able to help other veterans. But I think it's very important for everybody to know that don't just put your eggs all in one basket. You can do multiple stuff, but now it's like on you to do that time management when you do it, whether it's starting a business, RVing and changing your lifestyle. You have to force yourself to have a routine that works for you. And like you said, I mean, you went from a house to an RV, but on the same time, had to reestablish and re yourself into the civilian world kind of in a different atmosphere of I'm an RVer, you're embracing it. You have to be in that mindset to embrace it, and adapt your lifestyle to what worked for you and your family, to be able to be successful. So what do you think, as far as all that goes, is being successful, those big changes? Because sure, the transition, briefly talked about it, but I'm sure there's many details of that transition going from a large house, your transformation of getting your mind right, your body right, breathing exercises. Um, what is the best advice that you can give to a veteran of staying in their mindset as they go through their transition, staying in that right mindset?
Um, Something I noticed with a few guys I've spoken with, a lot of guys, when they separate, they see it as an opportunity to stop having to do all the things they were doing in the military, such as getting up early and being physically active because they were told to do it every day. And now they're like, oh, I'm on my own. I don't have to do that stuff anymore. I'm just going to stop doing it. So it's important to
Yeah.
stay active on some level. It actually does serve a pretty good purpose. If you wake up at a consistent time every day, your body is ready to go because you're not over sleeping and getting too much um, time in the evenings to go party or whatnot. I mean, it's okay to go out and enjoy yourself, but find a consistent rhythm in your day. As annoying as it was in the military, getting up early and getting us started on the day is actually pretty useful. I'm up every day at 5 a.m., usually by 5:30 at the latest, and I can get
Hmm.
all my self care done first thing in the morning. That way, the rest of the day I can, tackle whatever comes up. So stick with a nice, healthy rhythm. Stay physically active, um, and be prepared to uh, write your own rules. I was making a joke the other day. I was talking to, they said something, and I found it kind of entertaining. I was like, look, when you're in the military, you have a handbook for everything. You have a specific roadmap on how to get promoted to each level. Every job has a clear defined, this is how you do it. This is what you need to accomplish. This is how everything works. And it's all laid out. So it's very easy to follow. When you're a civilian, yes, there are laws. Yes, there are social norms, but really there's no handbook on how to do anything. You have to decide, how do you want to live your life that's going to work best for you and your family, or whoever you happen to be uh, partnering with. I found myself a lot of times in my previous business kind of getting stuck on my ego, like I mentioned earlier, kind of like not really like they owe me anything, but kind of like, I went through a bunch of my own shit in my career, so I deserve better. Um, you have to realize the military was great, and it was a huge portion of most of our lives. And it taught us a lot of things, and it made us stronger because of it. And the civilian world needs us to share the things we learn and our experiences with them, because most of the people running around are going through a bunch of crap they can't figure out on their own. They don't really know. They haven't had anybody to really kind of guide them along and teach them, how to get through struggle. So what I encourage everybody to do that listens to this is kind of look
Hmm.
at your life, look at the lessons you've learned, especially in the military and as a civilian, whatever the case, and look at everything as a lesson. And you were taught a whole bunch of really useful skills in the military that are very valuable to the civilian world, because most of them are kind of running around lost and confused because there is no rule book. They have no idea what they're doing, and they're just trying to figure it out. So what I decided is
Yep.
I was going to either sit around and be fat and miserable and just suffer and just suck it up and just kind of assume that was the rest of my life, or I can decide that the energy it took to change my life was less than the misery I was going through of being fat and miserable. So I was like, you know what? It's not that hard to get back into shape. I'll figure something out. I'll make it work, and I'll be a positive role model for others, because they need people. They, as in society, they need people to stand up and lead the way and like show them what a healthy lifestyle is, what the military is about, what we can offer to society, whatever capacity. If you have a, a 9 to 5 job or you're doing your own thing, be that leader, be that example for them. Because like I said, most everybody in the world is going through something right now that we have no idea what it is. We can't assume that our problem is worse than
Right.
theirs, because they have their own level of misery that they're capable of. But be
Right.
that role model that they see the military as in uniform, carry that same kind of mindset, um, in obviously a translated civilian form, but just, be the example for them, lead from the front, that type of thing. Right. Um, I've found
Yeah.
myself several times, every time I join an organization, like, hey, Chris, you want to be in charge of this? I'm like, I just joined. They're like, yeah, we want you to be in charge because nobody else is willing to stand up and take responsibility. I'm like, yeah, what's the deal? I'm in charge. Okay, let's go do this. Right. So don't be afraid
Right.
of getting in front of other people. Don't be afraid of taking responsibility, and carry yourself, um, with the pride that we all have. Everybody that serves in the military has this level of pride that, they did all these great things. Just embody that and really kind of bring it forth into your job or your family or whatever, and just let other people see the positive influence you're having on their lives.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on. And I talked to many other veterans, including Brandy Rector, who owns Sky Hunter Outfitters, is sponsoring this season. And I find that everybody, as a veteran, we have that sense of service still when we get out, and um, finding that purpose, and the purpose may change, and that's okay. Um, but I appreciate you coming on, Chris. And I'll have some links and stuff everybody can check out. I'll throw it up on my website, and have everything that if people want to be able to ask him questions. And it's David Boyer certified, right?
Oh,
Certified
David Bayer,
mindset facilitator, is
transformational
that correct?
mindset coach. Right.
David Bayer.
David Bayer.
Yeah, mindset coach. Yeah, so I appreciate you and your knowledge and everything else, and I hope everybody can take a little bit away from this. And if you guys want to reach out on social media, and I'll have links up on my website as well, that you can be able to contact Chris and maybe help through your transition and everything else. Chris, I appreciate you and everything that you're doing, and you as a person. I am really interested in being an RVer now. um, I actually talked to my wife of, at some point we're going to be downsizing. So um, that might be an option for us.
Definitely. Well, thanks for having me, Ryan.
So
If you want to have any questions about RV, let me know.
thank you, Chris. All right, guys, this is Everlasting Veteran. I am your host, Ryan Landry, also known as Wind Talker.
From the cannons, when the smoke clears, we're still standing. Yes, we stand our ground.
You're listening to Everlasting
From
Veteran.
the cannons, when the smoke clears, when the smoke clears.